may be seated. As you can see, the screen just went up. We're going to have rock climbing after church. And we have a very, I wouldn't say it's temperamental projector, but it's if you don't do things exactly right, it takes a while to fix it. And so we could probably fix it by the end of church, but you'd be paying attention to what's happening on the screen and not paying attention to us. So we're going old school. We're going rogue. You're going to have to look it up. You have Bibles around you. If you have it on an iPhone or an iPad, you might want to get your Bible app open. I have a long quote at the end. You just have to bear with me through it, but we don't have anything for the screens to you today. If you see some of my baby pictures up there, that's them just spoofing me. I'll be in Luke chapter 9 here in just a moment. I think this is a very important message for our church, and I think the subsequent messages after this, I think, are going to be very important also. And I hope I can communicate it right in a gracious tone in which I mean it. There is a word in our English language that we use quite casually, and as I do too. I mean, I've been thinking about this message for numerous months. We worked through the Heaven series, and of course we had some guest speakers coming in the last two out of the last 3 weeks. But this is a word of, I would say, spiritual application and a word of power in our lives. I think I can boldly say that it might not be a more important word as related to our redemption, as related to our spiritual transformation, and really our fruitfulness in God's kingdom. And that's an important sentence. Fulfilling our purpose in God's kingdom, bearing fruit in God's kingdom. In fact, it might not be a more important word for our families, our marriages, our personal purity, and our personal holiness than this word. This word, which is just the English word, not a special Greek word I'm going to be using, changed the world 2,000 years ago and turned it upside down. The word is very simply intentional. Intentional. When you look up intentional in the old web, it says something done on purpose or something done with a design in mind. Something is intentionally done or intentionally performed. Now let's read in Luke chapter 9. I love this passage. This is the Mount of Transfiguration. We're going to just narrate you through a little bit. This is an English Standard Version, I believe. We have some of them out there also, as well as NIVs. But now, about 8 days after these sayings, he took with him, that would be Jesus, Peter, James, and John, and went up on the mountain to pray. When he was praying, the appearance of his face was altered, and his clothing became dazzling white. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah. I always wondered how they knew it was Moses and Elijah. I mean, there was like no pictures. There was no they couldn't go back on Wikipedia and look up pictures of Moses and Elijah, but probably Jesus told them after, I would imagine. Talking with Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory. And what I have this underlined in my notes. Of course, you don't see it, and I have it italicized. But it's not italicized in the Bible. He who appeared in glory and spoke. Jesus is speaking to Moses and Elijah, spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. So he's not talking about leaving the current place. Hey, we're going to move here and go to Jerusalem. He's talking about his death. The conversation that he was having with Moses and Elijah on that mountain was about the crucifixion that he was purposely, intentionally going to Jerusalem to perform. Now Peter and those that were with him were heavy with sleep, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. And the men were parting from him. Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Not knowing what he said. That's classic Peter. And he was saying these things, a cloud came over and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. See Peter thinking, Okay, I take it back. Maybe that wasn't a good idea. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent. And no one in those days anything of what they had seen. Told no one in those days anything what they had seen. Now I'm going to skip down to verse 43 of that same passage. And he had come down off the mountain, certain miracles had taken place. And all were astonished at the majesty of God. But while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men." But they did not understand this saying, and it was concealed from them, so they might not perceive it, and they were afraid to ask him about that saying. So he said here, as I read, let this sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. And they're like, what is he talking about? A few verses down, verse 51. And when the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. Now, if you say set his face, that's an old phrase used, but I don't think I really have to explain it well. I think we understand that in our English. We understood it in the intention in which it was meant back then. He's saying that this plan for me to go to Jerusalem and to be crucified and tortured on behalf of mankind and redeem mankind was intentional. The disciples didn't understand this, but this is why I'm here. I'm not here to heal people, even though I'm going to heal people. I'm not here to take away human suffering. I'm going to heal those that come across my path, but when I'm taken away, there'll still be people unhealed. I'm not here to take away human suffering, and I will as it comes across my path because I am the God-man, but there'll be still human suffering after I leave. I did not come to feed the poor or to build houses for the poor, even though I will do that. I didn't come to open an orphanage. I came to redeem people from the prison of sin. Now, these things are all done to validate the purpose. I'm going to do these things, heal the sick, feed the poor, help the orphans, relieve the suffering. But my purpose, that's not my purpose. That's not to replace my purpose. My purpose is to deliver people from the bondage and the prison of sin so they could have a life they don't even know exists at the moment. He says, nevertheless, in the night of his betrayal in the garden, shortly after this, he said, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, what a powerful word that is. Not my will, but yours be done. He's saying, I don't really want to go through this, because I know what this is. I know what's about to happen. But nevertheless, I am intentionally choosing to go through with this process of crucifixion so I can be resurrected on the third day and change the face of life for the entire human race. Nevertheless, it's a word of intentionality. So Jesus never lost his mission. That's a good term they use in churchianity today, mission, a missionality, and on mission. And I can always use it as synonymous with the word intentional. He knew his word. He knew his mission. His mission was to redeem. There was all sorts of flashbulbs going off God, I'm not ready to be crucified yet because there's a whole bunch of people I haven't healed of leprosy. There's a whole bunch of blind people still out there. A whole bunch of deaf people still out there. Lots of young widows I have not helped. Lots of people I have not touched. There are masses I've never met. There are thousands that need food. But that's not why I came. I came to solve a much bigger problem than those things. Man's separation from God. And if I can fix that problem through shedding my blood as a perfect lamb slain before the foundations of the world, then I can fix man's ultimate problem. Will there be hungry? Sickness, disease, and death? Yeah. But boy, death will just have lost its sting. So seeing that everything Jesus did as our example, as intentional, our Christian life must be intentional. And this is a key word. It's a very important statement. I can see in the history, the mural of my Christian life, when things were very intentional and maybe sometimes when things weren't very intentional. Sometimes we get so good at being Christians, we can do it pretty much without the Holy Spirit. I go through behavior modification long enough, and just certain things I just don't do anymore. My wife doesn't let me. And I don't get tempted with certain sins anymore. I have other ones I get tempted with, but certain ones I don't. I've been able to say no to things in my life that wanted to undermine my walk with God. It hasn't been always in the last 35 years of walking with God where I've been clinging to the grace of God as much as I have the last 5 years anyway. Needing God. We can walk with God mechanically. We can walk with God culturally. In other words, I grew up in church. We can walk with God socially. It can become predictable. It can be controlled. Or we can say we are too young, too old. No one here too old. Too busy. Every one of us probably is too busy. Or to anything. Replaces this word intentional. This word intentional, when we embrace it and we understand it, replaces too young, too old, too busy, or too anything. When we as Christians say, I want to be an intentional Christian. Now, here's where I get brass tacks with you and just speak from my heart and talk about issues in our church family right here. This is an interesting time to be in churchianity. I think you'd all agree. Most churches are in decline. Culture has us marked as a bunch of wackos. No one's coming in the front doors of our church or anyone else's church, for the most part. Unless you have something in here that's really drawing them in. Like if I had hair, maybe that would do it. I don't know, something like that. No, and that's not a critique. It's really not. It's the way of the world. It's how the world has gone. It is saying, I've talked with many pastors, it's the same everywhere. Now, I'm asked this consistently. And we've had quite a history as a church, especially with our transitions and our moving. We moved, I think, 5 times in 7 years or something like that. Pastor Goldworthy, 6 times in 7 years or 8 years, something like that. So that's I mean, you know, we had a microphone in a suitcase, and we'd bring it out, preach, and then we'd pack it up, and all right, where are we going to be next week? And so that's not conducive to really church growth, and that's not, especially when you start moving a distance away. If it's a couple miles, it's one thing, but our last move was 8.5 miles. That's a long move. To go from Pinellas Park, if you're living in North Clearwater and you want to drive down for church, and all of a sudden we move 8 miles this way south, that's a long move. I understand that. So we grow as a church, and then we'd shrink as a church. We'd grow as a church, then we'd shrink as a church. And with every move, we got stability, and we'd grow, and then then we'd move 2 years later because we had to, and we would shrink again. But then that's okay, because then we'd have a level of stability, and then we'd start growing again. So good. So now we come to this incredible property that became ours just a few years ago, and we're not growing. We stabilize. In fact, not only are we not growing, we're shrinking. What has happened? I get asked this all the time. Why is not our church growing? And after 33 years of doing this and reading everything that can be read every week, still to this day, I read the Rainier stuff, the church growth stuff, I read this stuff is part of my daily, weekly diet of things that I read, because this is what I do. I can only come up with a couple things that we probably need to do. But let's just go do a history lesson. First of all, I think the pastor of this church, that'd be me, was deeply wounded 5 years ago. He was exhausted mentally, emotionally, and paralyzed administratively. When we saw our daughter killed, it took the strength out of my knees. And it didn't allow me to think clearly. I was exhausted. I would have to shut my mind down. It got incrementally, slowly better. The pastor would have quit 5 years ago, knowing how wounded he was, if God didn't intervene and say, don't quit, or the Yankees will win the World Series for the next 5 years. I said, I couldn't let that happen, so I couldn't quit. So I directly, and some of you know my story, I won't get into it, but he really spoke to me and said, no, I don't want you to quit. I want you to hang in there. And as Pastor Graziano said yesterday, he gave me that beautiful verse, my grace will be sufficient for you. I just need you to show up and do the best you can. And I got you back. And he has. 4 years later, that'll be a little over a year ago, I started getting my purpose back. A purpose is quite a thing to lose. If you don't have a purpose, you don't have any reason to get out of bed. You need a purpose in your life. And if a purpose is just surviving and running horizontally to get everything done, then you don't really have a purpose. I was told by a very respected, internationally renowned counselor who I had a privilege of talking to 2 times, it'd be a 5-year journey before I was mentally clear again and be able to focus again. And boy, he was just so right. He said, it'd be 10 years for your wife. We're only at 5 years, so I can't speak on that one. But it'd be 5 years for you. And so here's this pastor, wounded, knew I was wounded, mentally crippled, administratively crippled, pastoring a church, doing the best I could, truly was. And then I incrementally started waking up. Now, first thing I want to say this is thank you. Just thank you by hanging in there. You know, I went on sabbatical and about 100 people left church in 3 months. But many of you didn't. You hung in there and you stayed. You knew I was wounded, and God knows what I was even saying. Don't remember it all. So thank you from my family to you for hanging in there and keeping our church going forward when I just really had no strength to do it. Thank you for the leadership. They came in behind me and lifted up my arms and just said, don't worry about anything, Pastor. Mentally, emotionally, administratively, I woke up. Even the waking I kept hitting snooze a few times. Because you don't know how wounded you are in the moment. You sort of look over your shoulder later and you figure it out. Boy, I was really a mess. The first thing we noticed, and we noticed this right off the bat, but we noticed our property needed to be updated. If we want to grow, we needed to update this beautiful campus that we're given. And there was a lot of things to update, and there's still a lot of things we got to do. But we sort of did that. First big job, we had to fix the walkway. It looks beautiful out there now, doesn't it? The colonnade, it was just pipes, and they were all rotting before. The wood was falling down. And that was a big job. That was about probably out of $40,000 job just to fix that. But before we did that, we had to fix the lights, because when we got here, this building had taken a lightning strike on near the cross and blew all the lights out, didn't it, Everett? In order to fix the lights, we had to go up, and Andre was part of that. We had to go up and do all new wires and run all the lights back there. Huge job. We had Steve Ellerman, who was an electrician, and volunteered most of the time. About a $16,000 job we guesstimated. We fixed the lights. We renovated Barrington Hall. We retroed it. Andre did a lot of that work. That was about a $30,000 job. We took the library, gutted it out, built my office, built all the other offices. That wasn't that expensive, but it was still... I had some place to hang my Red Sox pictures. So, that came out really well. We needed a media room for Kids Connection. They're in there now, 4 TV sets. All sorts of cool stuff for our kids as they get picked up and dropped off from Kids Connection. We needed a coffee shop because coffee and Christianity just go from the same seed. You need them both. You can't really walk with God without coffee. Morning devotions without coffee are just empty. So I'm being facetious. We needed a media room. She's right back there. That's our media room. We needed some new sound equipment just recently, and we got new wires that came up that were donated to us. This is all new stuff. We needed a stage done because the stage was 75 up to 45 years old, whatever it was. So we painted it. This got done just before Easter. This is the last thing we did, actually, right here. That wasn't that expensive, really. I thought we cut corners very well. We needed to redo all our Kids Connection room, new flooring, new paint, new molding, every new bathroom. We had to do it. We did it. We needed a new men's room. You really needed a new men's room. Andre did that. He gutted that out. And we didn't do the women's room yet because that one was working. But this one, you walked in and woohoo! This is a men's room. The pipes had broken in the wall. And so there was a lot of work we had to do in there. We needed to fix the breezeway out front. We painted it, put the ceiling fans. The walkway was done this past year. We had to replace the whole electrical thing on the circuit for the whole church, right in the corner of the building. It had rotted out because of rain and the sprinkler system, and the city made us put it from over the top, underground. Pastor Burnside oversaw the whole thing, a licensed electrician. The materials alone, is all it cost us was $12,000. A lot of work. We heave-hoed everything in there. Put all new lights outside. Painted the inside of the chapel. What else do we do? Youth room upstairs, the youth room, the small kids youth room, the millennial teenage youth room is 85-90% done. They're meeting up there right now. We got new sound equipment, new projectors, new board, new something else too. I don't even remember now. Camera. Not even talking about the air conditioners. How many air conditioners, Everett, do we have? 27 air conditioners. I think we replaced 3 outright, the 10-ton. We just replaced the coffee shop, and we replaced the one in the offices. We had to. If we didn't have this dear man, John Anderson, JV AC, who doesn't charge us. He sends his guys out, fixes it, scavenges other air conditioners, fixes our air conditioners for free. We have probably fixed 42 air conditioners. Every week, boom, boom, boom. What's another air conditioner? Sure there is. John just has an office here now. His workers just don't even know that GPS it to our church. They know, it's going to go by grace, fix an air conditioner. They call, no, we just know one's broken. They've been fixed. We have a mother's room. We have a beautiful family's room. We have TVs and media everywhere. Would you agree with me on this point? At this point, I think we've done enough. We need a parking lot. We need new windows. We replaced about 7, 8 of them already. Every window needs to be replaced. But we've done enough. We can't look at the facility and say, well, we have, before we grow, we've got to do this more on the property. We need better sound. We need a better this. We need a new projector. No, you know what? It hasn't worked. Not sorry we did all this stuff. I think this place is amazing. So when I woke up, we fixed the place. It's fixed. Fixed good enough that we can do church just fine here. We needed some departmental leadership changes. We did that to the best of our ability. We needed a viable youth ministry when I woke up, and we have that. We needed to improve our music ministry. We've done that. We needed a community footprint. We're part of Adopt-A-Block. We're part of Family Promise. And now we have the Hannah Grace Homes. We have our community footprint's rather large. We got to pray as a church. We fasted and prayed all of October for the October fast. And other times. So what is it? Why aren't we growing? Now, let me say this back up before I come in with the dagger. You guys are awesome. You're a friendly church. You're a loving church. You're an accepting church. You're a kind church. You really are. You're a giving church. I had a man that's not here this morning. He's out of town, and he said he lost his daughter. Some of you know who I'm talking about. And he's just looking for anywhere he could connect any Christian fellowship. He went to 7 churches. And in going to 7 churches, he didn't find one person to shake his hand or even greet him. Then he comes here, and, we tackle him in the parking lot, stuff donuts in his mouth, give him coffee. And he's a dear friend of us today. Well, how about this? We need to advertise. We need to advertise. We've done mailings. I'm on Choice Radio program every week from 1.5 hour co-hosting with Peter O'Shea, averaging 50 to 100,000 listeners. I talked about this message Wednesday night. When we lost our daughter, People magazine came right into this sanctuary and took over 1,000 pictures of us as they ran an article. We've had Channel 9, 10, 13, 8, and 22 all here. Tampa Bay Times has done 2 articles. Our church name is everywhere. We don't have an advertising problem. Pastor, then why isn't our church growing? We can blame it on the culture. I would say that's partly true. But culture is not our enemy. And this here is the secret. Culture needs to become our ministry. We are called to win the culture, not to complain about it. This is our world. And I've come to the conclusion that this word intentional is the key. In January, I preached 4 weeks on vision and purpose, and intentionally. So I want to kick off the year with vision, and individually and corporately. I encouraged us all back then to intentionally target 5 people outside our life circle and pray for them every day, every week, however, in your work, in your neighbors, however, your life, because people in your life circle and my life circle are very different. We're all different. We printed up invite cards. We have a bunch of them still back there. Aiming towards Easter. 2 years ago, our Easter attendance was 30% higher than normal. This year, our Easter attendance was exactly 30% higher than normal. In other words, I'm not sure how many people actually became part of that purpose. I had this highlighted. It'd be on the screen if we had the screen up. Churches in this generation, in this country, who are not intentional will die. Churches don't die quick, they die slowly. But churches who are not intentional in this culture, 2017, will die. The unchurched are not coming through these doors. Other Christians may, frustrated with their local churches, that's not our target. People leave our church, go to other churches. People leave those churches, come to our desperate. That's going to continue to happen. That's never going to stop. That's not our target. It's the people who don't know Jesus, or the people who've been blown out of churchianity. They're not going to come in these doors unless the people in these pews and the guy standing on the stage intentionally bring them in. I went to a memorial service last night. Some of you may know Karen Vanderplo. Karen, she was a homeschooling mom. Her husband's a contractor. Her son graduated with my daughter Hannah back in Calvary Chapel homeschooling thing. And Karen was just a simple lady. She really was. She put on the Sunshine Run that we're part of, that they honored our daughter's foundation, our daughter's memory in 2013. She was one of the kindest, sweetest Christians. If I went to Webster's and I looked up the word Christian, it said Karen Vanderplo right after. She was battling cancer the whole time. Everywhere she went, she intentionally shared the gospel. And she meant it. If she went to a restaurant, by the time she left, the waitress was her best friend and part of her prayer group. She reached out to me and my wife. I don't even know how many times. She'd show up at my door, and she was the sweetest thing. You could never say no to her, ever. You want to put a flag on my front yard? I said, I don't want flags on my front yard. My lawn's too beautiful I have this beautiful lawn. And Karen said, I got a flag just talking about the Lord on your front yard. Can I put it there? What were you going to say? No. All right, yeah. And that was Karen. She went home to be with Gloria yesterday, and again, she wasn't somebody in front of people. I went to her memorial service, and you couldn't even get in the parking lot. They were jammed in the church, filled every seat, overflow, standing on the back walls. I don't know how many hundreds of people, maybe 1,000 people were there. She didn't have a public ministry. She was just a homeschooling mom and a part of a few women prayer groups, probably knowing her, 40 of them. But that's the impact she made. Everything in her life was intentional. She blessed our family deeply. When I used to work years ago, before I got my tour, Christian, back in Innisbrook, and I was just a waiter and a banquet manager there, and I remember having to go in and punch the time clock, and I had this mindset from my Bible college training as one of my teachers, that every time I went to work, I was on my mission field. And I knew it. I thought that way. And everything I said, everything I did, how I treated people, my work ethic, how hard I worked, all evolved around the fact that I knew I was a witness for Jesus Christ. That was my goal. I got paid. I needed the money. It was a good job. I actually did well there. But that was my purpose, was to win the people that I worked with day to day. They all knew I was a Christian. I shared the gospel with every one of them while we were running around with dirty dishes or whatever we were doing, because that was my mission field. It was an intentional ministry of mine. Now, unless the people in these doors, including the guy on the stage, we have an individual purpose to build the church locally, globally, this church can't grow. This church will not grow from what happens on the stage. It's going to grow from what happens out here in the pews. We will not make an impact in the world by what I say up here and how good of a music we have and what type of a presentation we put forward. We'll make an impact on the world when you understand that your world is your mission field, as mine is too. Now, what does that mean, Pastor? I gotta go answer all their Bible questions? No, not necessarily. You might. Yeah, I would say equip yourself to answer those questions. I have an answer for the hope, Peter said. It might just mean, hey, come to my church. Donut holes and free coffee. I'll sit with you. The pastor's weird. It's just really worth going to hear him just ramble. And they might come, because at the end of the service, I'm going to give an invitation for people to know the Lord. Here's the statement. Well, it's God's job to bring people in. Oh, really? You have your Bibles open? Or your iPad or your iPhone? Acts 1:8. But you will receive power from the Holy Spirit has come upon you. Jesus' last words to the disciples. And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. He didn't say, hey, I'm going to hang out here and give the gospel. I'm going to show up in front of all of Jerusalem, appear in front of them, resurrected, freak them all out, and they're going to get saved. He says, no, I'm going to appear to just you guys, and then you're going to be my witnesses. I'm taking what I came to do and giving it to you. John 17, verse 8, as Jesus praying to the Father, as you sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. Who's them? His disciples. A little bit later in John 20, verse 21, and Jesus said to them again, peace to be unto you, as my Father has sent me, and so send I you. So is it God's job to bring them in? Or is it ours? Again, we do most things well. None of this is meant in a legalistic way. None of this is meant in a manipulative way. This is not any way an ultimatum. It's simply to be an honest evaluation of our local assembly. If we are to grow, and we can, if we can start filling this place up, and we can, there's nothing else we can do this side of the stage. The rest of it has to happen this side of the stage. And that starts with you and God saying, I want an intentional purpose. God, I want to be a witness for you in my community, in my job, in my workplace, in my life circle. If we do not corporately and individually become intentional, which is simply looking at the unchurched, praying for them, loving them, and maybe inviting them just to come. It's that simple. It's not that complicated. I look at the unsaved. I pray for them. Jesus, open up a door. Let them come. I pray for them. I maybe hand them a card. I'm a friend to them. I listen to them complain and listen to them stand by them when they lose people and their loved ones. I become their friend. I become Christ to them. If we don't do that, 5, 10, 15 years, probably not that long, probably 5 or 10 years, this local assembly will be non-existent. Those are strong words, but I don't mean them to be threatening. I'm just saying it's now. It's now or never. It's not too late. We can turn this around and turn around however. It's going to be from the pews of the world, and my friend, trust me, after I get done, I'll be sitting in a pew just like you. It starts with me. You know, I targeted those 5 people in my life. I prayed for them. I only got the chance to invite like a few of them because some of them moved before I could invite them, and none of them came. So I'm not saying do what I did, because I wasn't successful in bringing anyone either. But now, I'm like God, this is my intention now. Now you put intentional You can take this word intentional. I'm going to end with a rather long quote from Charles Spurgeon in a moment. But take this word intentional and bring it into other areas of your life. Intentional purity, intentional faithfulness, intentional church attendance, intentional tithing, and intentional being an intentional husband, wife, child, father. When we purpose and we design it to be that way. And one of the things in my life, and I know for me, is my challenge is I want to be a biblical husband and a biblical dad. So I intentionally plan to be that on purpose. I take my needs, dismiss them, my desires, dismiss them, don't even look at those things. How can I love my wife as Christ loves the church? How can I be a covering to Sadie Lynn? It's an intentional thing. But with that said, let's just close. Romans 14, verse 8, we live unto the Lord. Now, if God, this is Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers, 150 years ago or so. If God had willed it, I'll read this as slow as I can because I know it's a long quote. Each of us might have entered heaven at the moment of our conversion, if God had willed it. It was not absolutely necessary for our preparation for immortality that we should tarry here. It is possible for a man to be taken to heaven and to be found meet to be a partaker of the inheritance in the saints in the light, though he has just believed in Jesus. In other words, we could have just believed. God just said, hey, you're a believer, come on home. That's what he's saying. That would have been great. But he didn't do that. He said, hey, you're a believer now. Be a witness to me to Judea, Samaria, and the parts of the world. It is true that our sanctification is a long and continued process, and we shall not be perfected till we lay aside our bodies and enter within the veil. But nevertheless, is that word. Had the Lord so willed it, he might have changed us from imperfection to perfection and taken us to heaven all at once. Then I had these letters bolded in my notes. Why then are we here? Would God keep his children out of paradise a single moment longer than necessary? Why is the army of the living God still on the battlefield when one charge might give them victory? Why are his children still wandering hither and thither through a maze when a solitary word from his lips would bring them into the center of the hopes in heaven? The answer is, they are here, planet Earth, that they may live unto the Lord and may bring others to know of his love. Thus we remain on earth as sowers to scatter good seed, as plowmen to break up fallow ground, as heralds publishing salvation. We are here, my friends, as salt of the earth, to be a blessing to the world. We are here to glorify Christ in our daily life. We are here as workers for him and as workers together with him. Let us see that our life answers this end. Let us live earnest, useful, holy lives to the praise and the glory of his grace. Jesus, thank you for these words, and challenging words. I know challenging for the preacher. Every head bowed and every eye closed. We don't know everyone here today. Maybe you're listening on a webcast, or maybe you're just going to see this on YouTube later on because someone's going to tell you to look at it. If you're here today and never asked Jesus Christ, or you're listening later on, months later, years later, you've never asked Jesus Christ, listen to me. Salvation is a free gift. It's just free. Jesus says, come just as you are, and I'll change your life. He doesn't come with postrequisites or prerequisites. He just says, come. Just as you are, with all the baggage, with all the stuff. Just come. If in your own way, your own words, between you and the Lord, you ask Jesus Christ to be your friend, your Savior, your Lord this morning, let the person who brought you know. Salvation is an event. It's not a sequence. It's not a lifestyle. It's not being good. It's not being bad. It's simply believing that Jesus is exactly who he says he is and did exactly what he said he'd do. Paid for the sins of mankind. Father, take this message and change me. Help me become more intentional. Help me see the folks in my life circle that don't know you and give me the wisdom and maybe more importantly, the courage to pray, invest, to love, and to invite. God, this church for years, Pasadena Baptist, Grace Connection for years, two churches coming together in over 90 years of ministry. Lots of messages, lots of classes, lots of people have been born again and saved through these ministries. Father, we're living in the most perilous days that any of us have ever lived in. Your return seems so imminent. We can taste it. God, we want this to be a new beginning for our church, not a slow ending. We don't want to end our race walking. We want to end our race sprinting. We don't want to go through in this sort of do church because that's what we've always done. We want to be the church intentionally and reach the people in our world. Give us the grace, we pray, to do that. Bless the offering as part of our worship. In Jesus' name, amen.